Buckle up, everyone. We've got a lot to cover today. Elections, global tensions, a bit of royal intrigue, a whole lot going on.
It's definitely a busy news day.
Let's start in Georgia, where things are getting, well, kind of heated. Mikhail Kavalishvili, the former football star, he's about to be named president.
It's been a very controversial election, lots of accusations of rigging, and yeah, both the U.S. and EU are not happy about it.
A lot of people in Georgia are pro-EU.
Right, and Kavalishvili's, he's seen as anti-Western, not exactly helping things.
Definitely adding fuel to the fire. There are even reports of protesters being detained, some even tortured.
Yeah, and the EU is even considering sanctions against the Georgian government.
Could be a major turning point in their relationship with the West.
Absolutely. A lot riding on this.
Meanwhile, France can't seem to keep a prime minister for very long.
Fourth one this year, right? Francois Bayrou's the newest.
All thanks to Macron and those snap elections.
Yeah, total political deadlock.
Bayrou's got his work cut out for him, trying to form a stable government.
Public's getting pretty concerned, too. I mean, can he even do it? Where Michel Barnier failed?
Only time will tell, I guess. Now, for a story that really raised some eyebrows, Trump invited Xi Jinping, the Chinese president, to his inauguration.
Kind of a big deal. Never happened before. No foreign leader has ever been to a U.S. inauguration.
What do you think it means?
Shows how complicated things are between the U.S. and China right now, especially under Trump.
Yeah, he's praised Xi before, but then he also slams China for how they do trade.
And some of Trump's cabinet picks. Hardcore China hawks.
Recipe for disaster, or maybe just some really awkward handshakes.
We'll have to see. This could have a huge impact on global trade and even security.
From political games to a real tragedy. Dr. Saeed Jutta, the only bone surgeon left in northern Gaza, was killed by Israeli tank fire.
Just awful.
Really highlights the humanitarian crisis going on there.
Absolutely devastating for the healthcare system there. Dr. Jutta was dedicated to his patients, even with all the danger.
It's a huge loss.
Yeah.
Just makes you think about the desperate need for peace in that region.
It does. Makes you wonder, how can we even ensure basic healthcare, especially specialized care for Palestinians in Gaza?
Big questions, and not a lot of easy answers. Now, this one feels ripped from a spy novel. Prince Andrew was in contact with a businessman who's accused of being a Chinese spy.
Yeah, this is causing quite a stir over in the UK.
The guy, they call him H6. He was banned from the UK.
A court found out that he was trying to use his connection with Prince Andrew to, influence things politically.
The prince says he stopped talking to H6 after the government told him to.
Sure, but it still raises concerns about security, foreign influence, all that.
Speaking of trouble, former Irish rugby player Dennis Coulson was just convicted of rape in France.
This has sparked so much anger. People are demanding accountability in the rugby world.
Another Irish player, Chris Farrell, got a suspended sentence.
For not stopping it.
Sad reminder that athletes, even famous ones, are not above the law.
Absolutely. Sexual assault, it's serious. The consequences are huge.
And this case also makes you think about the culture inside these sports teams. The responsibility of teammates to, step in.
A lot to unpack there.
Okay, let's take a break from the heavy stuff for a minute. A little good news. The Crown of Thorns, the relic. It's back in Notre-Dame.
5 years after that terrible fire.
What a symbol of hope for the cathedral, for France.
That dramatic rescue. And now it's back where it belongs. Amazing.
It really shows how even after something so awful, there's still that spirit to rebuild, that faith.
Powerful.
And a huge turn of events. Bashar al-Assad and his entire family have left Syria. They're asking for asylum in Russia.
This is the end of an era. The Assad family, they ruled for 50 years.
What happens now?
It's hard to say. Will Syria become stable? Will there be peace after that brutal civil war?
We'll be watching closely. Big changes ahead.
Yeah, and what about the international community? What will they do about Assad being in Russia? Will he be prosecuted for war crimes? A lot of uncertainty.
This next story really shows how angry people are about healthcare in the U.S. Brianna Boston, she's been charged with threatening a healthcare company.
And she used phrases that were found at the murder scene of that United Healthcare CEO, Brian Thompson.
So tragic. Makes you think about the erosion of trust and the need for real reform.
Absolutely.
It's pretty scary to think this rhetoric could lead to more violence.
It's a possibility. People are desperate. They feel unheard.
From healthcare to, time itself. Trump says he wants to get rid of daylight saving time, calls it too expensive and inconvenient.
Here we go again, right? The debate that never ends.
Some people love those long summer evenings. Others hate that time change, messing with their sleep.
And what about the economic impact? Does it help businesses or does it just use more energy?
We'll see if Congress gets on board with Trump's idea. Could be a big change.
It could. A lot to consider. Public health, the economy, even how much energy we use.
Switching gears to Russia and Ukraine, things are escalating again. Russia just launched a massive attack on Ukraine's energy infrastructure.
On the coldest day of winter, no less.
Targeting civilians like that, it's just cruel.
Shows the real cost of this war.
And the need for a peaceful solution.
For sure. But I'm worried things are going to get even worse. Could affect energy prices all over the world.
In a strategic move, Israel is digging in on Mount Hermon.
That's a key spot, right on the border of Syria, Lebanon, and the Golan Heights.
They took it after Assad fell.
The UN isn't happy about it. They're saying Israel should leave.
This could really shake things up in the region. We'll have to see how it plays out.
Definitely one to keep an eye on. Things are already pretty unstable there.
Back in the U.S., McKinsey just agreed to pay a whopping $650 million to settle charges related to the opioid crisis.
It's a massive settlement, shows how far-reaching the consequences of this epidemic are, and how accountable companies like McKinsey are.
They advised Purdue Pharma on how to sell more OxyContin,
which obviously had disastrous results.
This settlement, it's a step towards justice. But it can't bring back all those lives that were lost, or take away the pain so many families have gone through.
You're right.
In Kenya, a string of suicides among trainee doctors has exposed the harsh realities of their healthcare system.
These young doctors, they're working crazy hours, facing tons of pressure. Many of them can barely make ends meet.
It's just tragic.
It really is, and so many of them haven't even been paid on time.
Just heartbreaking. Makes you think about all the sacrifices healthcare workers make.
They put their lives on the line every day, caring for others, and often they don't get the support or the respect they deserve.
The Kenyan government says they're going to start mental health programs. But is that enough?
I don't know. They need to fix the whole system, make sure these doctors are paid fairly, create a culture that values their well-being.
Until then, we may see more of these heartbreaking stories.
I'm afraid so.
Nancy Pelosi, the former Speaker of the House, has been hospitalized.
She was injured during her trip to Luxembourg.
We're hoping for a quick recovery.
Yeah, she's a big deal in American politics, a real trailblazer for women. Her constituents love her.
Her absence is going to be felt.
It will. She's a brilliant strategist and a strong voice for the Democrats. This is a tough time for her to be sidelined. Politics in the U.S. are so polarized right now.
Bolivia just extradited their former anti-drugs chief to the U.S.
Maximiliano Davila, or Macho, as he's known, he's accused of protecting cocaine shipments that were headed to the U.S.
He was in charge of Bolivia's anti-narcotics agency.
Yeah, pretty wild.
This case could really expose some of the corruption going on in the Bolivian government.
Definitely. And it shows how deep these international drug trafficking networks go.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte is calling for a wartime mindset.
He's basically saying that NATO members need to spend more on defense and be prepared for a long fight against Russia.
Tensions are running high, especially with what's happening in Ukraine.
A lot of people are wondering if NATO is really ready for a big conflict.
Rutte's warning is a serious one. NATO members need to step up their game.
And this is exactly what Trump was criticizing before, remember? NATO not spending enough. So how will the U.S. react now?
It's a pivotal moment for the alliance.
It is. The world is facing some serious challenges.
Political instability.
Yeah.
International tensions, humanitarian crises, and the threat of war always looming.
It can feel overwhelming, right? But that's why we do this. We break down the news, help you connect the dots, see the bigger picture.
Because knowledge is power, right? We want to help you make sense of it all.
Absolutely. Stay informed, stay engaged, keep asking questions.
That's all for part 1. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll dig a little deeper into some of these stories.
And explore what it all means for the future. This wartime mindset that Rutte's talking about, it's pretty significant, especially now that Trump's back in the White House.
He wasn't exactly a fan of how much NATO countries were spending on defense.
Right. So it seems like Rutte is trying to, get ahead of that. Make sure NATO's united.
Because Trump's made it pretty clear he might not be so quick to help out allies that aren't, pulling their weight financially.
Exactly. This whole push for more spending, it's not just about Russia. It's about making sure NATO doesn't fall apart from the inside.
So how do you think Trump's going to react? Will he see this as NATO finally getting serious? Or is it too little too late?
That's the million-dollar question. And the answer, well, it could change everything for NATO and for, how the U.S. and Europe get along.
We're seeing some pretty serious challenges all over the world right now.
Yeah.
Political instability, international tensions, humanitarian crises, and of course the constant threat of war.
And all these stories we've been talking about, they might seem separate, but they're all connected. They all contribute to this feeling that the world's a very uncertain place right now.
It's like a giant puzzle, Each piece is a different part of the world. And the more we understand how they fit together, the better we can see the big picture.
Exactly. And that's what we're trying to do here, help you connect those dots, help you understand the world in a more, informed way, see all the different perspectives.
Let's talk about Kenya. Those suicides among the trainee doctors, it's just awful.
It really is. These young doctors, they wanted to help people, to heal them. And the system they were working in, it drove them to despair.
They were working insane hours under so much pressure.
And a lot of them were barely scraping by.
So many of them hadn't even been paid.
It's more than just the money, though. It's the emotional strain, the burnout, the feeling that nobody cares, that they're trapped.
One of the doctors, he said it was a thankless job. And it's true. These people put their lives on the line every day to care for others, and they get treated like this.
It's a systemic failure, and it's costing lives.
The government's saying they're going to create some mental health programs, but is that going to fix the real problems?
I don't think so. They need to change the whole system. Pay these doctors a living wage. Create a culture where their well-being matters.
If they don't, we're going to see more of these tragedies.
I agree, and it's a reminder to all of us. The health of a nation depends on the health of its healthcare workers. And in Kenya, they're in crisis.
From Kenya, let's jump to something that affects everyone, no matter where you live. Daylight saving time. Trump wants to get rid of it.
Oh boy, here we go.
He says it costs too much. It's too inconvenient.
It's one of those debates that just never dies, right?
The people who love those long summer evenings, they're not going to be happy.
And then there are those who say it messes with their sleep, their health.
And what about the economy? Does it really help businesses? Or does it just make us use more energy?
It's a complicated issue.
Trump might have just reopened a can of worms that's been closed for decades.
It'll be interesting to see what Congress does, if there are enough people on both sides to actually make a change.
We've got some breaking news. Nancy Pelosi, the former Speaker of the House, she's been hospitalized.
Yeah, she was hurt during her trip to Luxembourg.
Sending good thoughts for a speedy recovery.
She's a giant in American politics, a real role model for women, and her constituents, they absolutely adore her.
Politics are so divided right now, it's going to be hard to fill her shoes.
It really is. She's a brilliant political mind, a strong voice for the Democrats. This is a tough time for her to be out of commission.
This just reminds us that, even the most powerful people, they're still human.
So true. And it also shows how important it is to have strong leaders, people who can step up when things get tough.
Bolivia is cracking down on drug trafficking.
Yeah.
They just extradited their former anti-drugs chief to the U.S.
Maximiliano Davila, they call him Macho. He's facing some serious charges. They say he was protecting cocaine shipments, making sure they got to the U.S.
And this guy was in charge of Bolivia's anti-narcotics agency. It's mind-boggling.
It really is. This case, it could blow the lid off some major corruption within the Bolivian government.
And it shows how these international drug rings operate. They're everywhere.
It's a global problem. And a reminder that the fight against drugs is, well, it's a long way from over.
NATO's on high alert. Their Secretary General, Mark Rutte, he's calling for a wartime mindset.
He's urging NATO members to, boost their defense budgets and get ready for a long confrontation with Russia.
Tensions are already high, with the situation in Ukraine. Makes you wonder, is NATO really prepared for a major conflict?
It's a good question. And Rutte's warning, it's a wake-up call. NATO countries, they need to step up, make sure they have the resources to deter any threats from Russia.
This sounds familiar, right? Trump's been saying this for years, that NATO isn't spending enough.
Yeah, so this is a big test for the alliance. How will they respond? How will the U.S. react?
That attack on Ukraine's energy grid, right in the middle of winter, it's a reminder of how brutal war can be.
Absolutely. Deliberately targeting civilians like that, it's awful.
Russia's not backing down. We have to be prepared for things to escalate even further.
And what about the global impact? Energy prices could skyrocket.
Things are heating up in the Middle East, too. Israel's now in control of Mount Hermon.
Strategically important location, right? Border of Syria, Lebanon, and the Golan Heights.
They took it after Assad was ousted. But the UN, They're saying Israel needs to pull out. This could really destabilize the region. We'll be keeping a close eye on it.
Yeah, things are already incredibly tense there. Any shift in the balance of power, it's a cause for concern.
Back here in the U.S., we're still dealing with the fallout from the opioid crisis. McKinsey just agreed to a huge settlement.
$650 million, it's a lot of money.
And it shows just how much damage this epidemic has caused, and how companies like McKinsey, they have to be held accountable.
They were advising Purdue Pharma, helping them figure out how to sell more OxyContin.
And we all know how that turned out.
Mm,
This settlement, it's a step in the right direction, but it can't undo the pain, the loss that so many families have experienced.
you're right. No amount of money can bring back the lives that were lost.
On a more hopeful note, the Crown of Thorns, that precious relic, it's finally back in Notre-Dame Cathedral.
5 years after that devastating fire, it's really quite remarkable.
It's a symbol of resilience, of the enduring power of faith.
It's a sign that even after tragedy, even after destruction, there's always hope.
It's been a day of highs and lows, that's for sure. But it just goes to show you, we live in a complex world, a world where everything is connected.
And that's what we're trying to do here, right? Help you make sense of it all. Help you understand how these stories, these events, they impact all of us.
So stay informed, stay engaged, and never stop being curious about the world around you.
Because knowledge, understanding, that's how we make the world a better place.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.